Are you talking to a machine? And would you know it if you are? I'm Tanya Hall for ZDNet and Tech Republic, and joining me is Peter Cahill. He is the founder and CEO of Voysis. Welcome, Peter.
Yep, thanks, Tanya.
So what does Voysis do?
So Voysis is a complete voice AI platform. And so I guess at the moment you're familiar with the Amazon Echo, Google Home. They're being quite successful, with getting consumers to, adopt to voice interfaces. But for any other company out there that wants to have a voice interface built into their products, we're one of the very few companies that makes that possible.
So people have been working on text to speech for decades. In fact, what is Voysis doing to move this forward?
So yeah, I think all the speech technologies have been, people have worked on them for decades, and it's only been in recent years that we're seeing the technologies really work good enough for consumer applications. And so particularly in the case of Voysis, there is a new era of technologies emerging at the moment called WaveNet, based on some discoveries from DeepMind. And I think kind of probably the first time consumers are really seeing that in applications is you may have seen the Google Duplex video from maybe a couple of months back, where Google demonstrated a voice system working over telephone, making reservations where the person at the other end of the phone line wasn't aware that they were talking to a machine. And we're going to see more and more of that coming in the coming months, coming years, both from Voysis, Google, maybe a few others as well.
So explain the user experience. What kind of conversations or dialogue are possible today based on just that Apple experience where some of those actually didn't work?
Yeah, so I think that there's two aspects to this. I think for many of the assistants that are there today, they will support fairly complex commands if you know how to talk to them. And it's a big challenge that companies are both users and companies are facing. That is, how do you teach your users what the system can do and how to talk to it? And so at Voysis, we do a lot of user studies, but we want to build systems that are very flexible. That if somebody, no matter how somebody may phrase a certain command, the system should be able to work with that. Whereas we see some other assistants will require that, if you, say, for example, if you wanted to play a song, in some cases, like on the Echo, you need to speak to it in a very specific way and kind of phrase your command in a very kind of rigid way if you wanted to do, but if you wanted to actually understand what you're saying to it.
How do you approach a broad range of languages?
So for us right now, we do primarily focus on US English. And I guess the general approach to languages is based on what customers ask for. So we do get a lot of requests for Spanish in particular. And we are actively working on other languages internally, but just the only one we've released publicly to date is US English, which is kind of the same strategy we saw from the platform companies as well.
To what degree is mobile driving the need for voice?
Yeah, I think mobile is key. It's, the smart speakers are nice in that you don't have to touch any buttons to use them. But without a screen, they're always very limited. And, particularly since smartphones emerged, almost everybody has a mobile device with a high quality microphone that's designed for recording human voice. They have a screen that, it's in your hands. So the fact that the screen is even small is not necessarily a negative thing. And I think voice solves a lot of the problems around mobile. So one good example is perhaps if you look at e-commerce, right now, a lot of the mobile experience that exists for e-commerce are kind of a desktop experience that it's been kind of squashed onto the screen of a cell phone, which is obviously much smaller. In many cases, voice solves a lot of problems there, where if you're using voice, you could just talk to an app and say, I'm looking to buy a jacket that's made of this material and it's this color for around this price. And, the screen can be used to show you the products instead of filling the screen with, buttons and filters and search bars and all these types of things.
How are voice interfaces going to evolve?
We're going to see them they're going to become far more natural than they are today. Like I think what's there today is obviously quite usable. People are using them, but at the same time, probably with the exception of Google, most voices out there sound very robotic still. The speech recognition accuracy has improved a lot, but there's still times where it'll get it wrong. Especially if anyone has used any of these smart speakers, for 5 minutes, there's probably been at least one command that's got wrong. And so we'll see it getting more and more accurate, and also for conversation to start to emerge. Because again, right now these interfaces are still quite instructional. Like you give it one command telling it what you want it to do, but there's almost no context on that. You can't really have much of a conversation with them at this point.
A post on your website actually quoted our Forbes article that said voice search will help retailers understand the intent of customer search. So how do you get to the intent with voice?
So yeah, so I think this is a big topic we're seeing in a lot of verticals. That if you think of, in I guess on the internet in general, we've seen almost every company now spends a significant amount of money on analyzing what their users are doing on their website or in an app or I guess wherever they're interacting. Um, Yet all these interactions are limited; they're constrained by the graphical user interface. So if you put 4 buttons in front of a user and then you try to analyze which button did they press, you're always constrained by what you put in front of them. Whereas in the case of voice, there are no constraints. People can talk completely natural at any point in that interaction and just tell the system what they wanted to do or what are they looking for or whatever it is they want to say. There's no constraints. And so I think in turn then for the companies who have voice interfaces in their products, they can do very rich analytics on really querying what are our customers asking for, as opposed to what button did they click.
In what markets or industries do you see untapped applications for voice? I mean, where will we be with voice in the next 3 to 5 years?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I think what's going to happen is over time, different verticals are going to really become ready for voice. And so for us at Voices, we focus a lot on retail and e-commerce right now, because that's where we're seeing both consumers and brands and retailers. They see the value in voice interfaces for them today. They see the problems it'll solve for them. I think over time, it's inevitable that we will eventually start to see growth of voice for retail banking, for example. We'll see it in call centers. Absolutely. If I call up a call center, there should be no need for me to be on hold for 30 minutes or more. Even when the call has been answered, a machine can be fully aware of every interaction I've had. If I've called them up before, what products I've bought, what problems did I have in the past. A machine can query all that information far quicker than any human can. And I think within the next 5 years, certainly we'll see call centers become at least some level of automation there, which I think will give a much richer experience to the customers who are using them. We'll see it in many other verticals too. The car is an obvious one. Smart home is an obvious one, I think. But there's anywhere where people interact with machines, voice will have an impact on that. And I guess also in the developing world as well, where literacy levels aren't as high as they may be in developed countries, and even as more and more languages are supported by these systems, we can have people who are not familiar with using computers just be able to tell a machine what they wanted to do or to have access to information in general.
Okay, Peter, this is an ongoing ethical question, but should voice enable AI self-identify as AI?
Yeah, so this is a question that was really raised a lot around the demo of Google Duplex. And yeah, from one point of view, they could have released that duplex system, a couple of years back, and gave it a robotic voice. And in that case, it wouldn't necessarily need to identify itself, but it would just sound like a robot, so people could guess. But I don't think anybody would have been impressed by it had they done that. It sounded so natural as what made duplex get as much attention as it did. And I think it's hard. If your cell phone rings and you answer it, and the first thing you hear is "this is a robot," chances are you're just going to hang up. I think the jury's still out on it, to be honest. I think in certain cases people will accept it, but I think we'll see systems that are doing both, to be honest. And it's even if one country brings in regulations on it.
Well, there's the ongoing debate, right? I mean,
some countries will have, or even states may have regulations on it. Some states won't, or even on a global scale, it's the same with countries that we'll see some regulations on it. But I think we'll see applications that do both. The pressure is probably more on the platform companies like the Googles, Apple, Facebook, Amazon, in terms of what level of how upfront are they with people about this.
Well, are you talking to a robot or not? We may never know. Who knows? I really appreciate your time.
Yeah, I honestly think people won't be able to identify if they're talking to a robot or not. Within the coming years, it's inevitable. These technologies have just moved forward so quickly.
Agreed. I really do appreciate your time, and thanks for sharing some insight. If somebody wants to connect with you and they want to find out more about your work or connect with you personally, how can they do that?
The two best ways are either via email, so just peter@voysis.com, or on Twitter, which is @Peter Cahill.
All right. Well, thanks again, Peter. And if you want to connect with me or find more of my interviews, you can do that right here on ZDNet or Tech Republic, or go to my website, tanyahall.net. I have links to all my social platforms. Thanks for watching.